It's Wednesday, February 25th. I'm talking to Irene Mathyssen, who is the NDP's critic for status of women and the Member of Parliament for London-Fanshawe. We're talking about some of the less well-known aspects of the budget bill, hidden horrors of the budget bill. From the point of view of status of women, what are the horrors of this budget bill?
Well, there are a number of them, but front and center for the women of this country is embedded in this bill pay equity piece of legislation. For years and years and years, more years than many of your viewers and readers will remember, women have been demanding that they have equal pay for work of equal value. And in some of the provinces, Quebec, Manitoba, and Ontario, that's the law, and it works very well. But we don't have a federal law covering federally regulated job sites. So we've always needed that. And in addition to that, we need the leadership of the federal government in terms of ensuring that women's equality becomes part of the way we do business all across the country. So that's been missing. It's been missing for a very long time. And the end result has been that women were denied justice. If they made pay equity complaints against the government, they were taken to court. And the end result is that the Government of Canada has held up pay equity settlements for 17, 20 years simply because they refuse to acknowledge a woman's right to equal pay for work of equal value. And so in the late 90s and early part of 2000, the Liberal government finally began to relent a bit, and they appointed a task force. And this task force reported in 2004, and they recommended proactive pay equity with a commissioner so that women had recourse in terms of they could go to this commissioner and get a hearing in regard to their claims. And finally achieve some form of justice. And the report laid out in exquisite detail how the legislation could be put in place, the regulations, and the commission. It was a 580-page report. It was absolutely first-rate in terms of describing what needed to happen. The Liberals had that report, and they could have acted on it. They chose not to. And it's interesting because after the election of the Conservatives, I did in fact hear one of the Liberal members say we should have done pay equity when we had the chance. And now the chance has been absolutely lost because the bill that is embedded in the budget, in the Budget Implementation Act, essentially denies women that right. It denies them their right to be heard by the Human Rights Tribunal. All pay equity disputes will now go to the Public Sector Labour Board. They have no expertise, they don't understand the issue, and women once again are relegated to suffering this lack of justice. In addition to that, if a woman decides that she's not satisfied with a pay equity settlement and her union tries to help her, there's a $50,000 fine for aiding and abetting social justice. That's in this pay equity sham of a bill that the Conservatives have put in place. But even worse, they have relegated pay equity to collective bargaining. And they're saying, well, they do that in Manitoba. It's not true. Pay equity and the right to equal pay for work of equal value is a human right. The United Nations has declared that a human right. And human rights are not negotiable. They're not part of the give and take of collective bargaining. Now in Manitoba, there is a separate discussion, a separate bargaining in regard to pay equity, but it's not one of the bargaining chips that is usually on the table in a employer-employee negotiation. So we see, very clearly the clock has been rolled back. Women's rights have never meant anything to this government. Right from the get-go, from the beginning of their mandate, they have defunded Status of Women of Canada, have undermined the organizations that fight for women's equality, set back women's equality, and have pretended to the world and the women of this nation that somehow they're watching out for equality and the agenda to promote women's equality. Not true. This bill and this shoddy treatment of women in a budget implementation bill underscores that. And the fact that the Liberals are supporting that is shame on them. They speak in the House of Commons, they talk to the media about how despicable this sham of a pay equity bill is, but they're still going to vote for it.
Thank you very much, Irene.
Thank you, Ish. I appreciate it, and thank you to the good folks at the Straight Goods. It's one of the saving graces of the media in this country.